Does the black moon howl?
Only for those with an unwavering desire to hear the truth.
Access granted.
You have been selected for an opportunity, an orientation as a trusted associate, if you will, into the secured, contained, and protected files of the Foundation. SCP Unredacted distributes new files for review Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on secure channels on YouTube, Spotify, and scp-unredacted.captivate.fm.
Hey there, SCP fans. My name is Grigori Karpin, and this is Simply Creative People, the show about SCP creatives, be they authors, artists, or off-site content creators like YouTube and TikTok. We're focused on bridging the gap between various fans and serving as an introduction to different concepts and stories on the Wiki. So, many welcomes to all, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Simply Creative People. We did not have a massive delay this time. It's only been about a week, which is good. But we're here, back again.
That's one way to look at it.
That's right. Yeah, it's been kind of a weird week. So, we are here to talk about some more horror-based SCPs. My name is Grigori Karpin, and joined as always with my lovely co-host.
I am afraid I am Harry Blank.
And joining us again, Dysadron. Hello.
Hello, it's good to be back.
It is. It's very good.
It is good for you to be back. Yes, we are happy to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Honestly, I like it anytime we have repeat guests. It's really quite fun.
Yes, you're not actually you're not part of the union unless you come back at least once.
I mean, fingers crossed that opinion doesn't change over the next 2 hours or however long we spend talking.
I'd say the odds are extraordinarily low.
Yeah, very unlikely. I think we're good. But yeah, we had such a good time when we did this thing right around Halloween, horror SCPs, that by the end of it, you, Harry, it's just we should just do it again. And, you know, honestly, it's just a brilliant idea. So
we had such a good time that we went to like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I actually had to leave, which I didn't even think was going to happen, and so I didn't mention it beforehand. But we just got so into them, and Dysadron brought like so much detail to the articles that we're talking about, and it was fantastic. So I figured we got at least another episode out of this, which is great.
Yeah, and yeah, it is awesome. Last time we did have a kind of a hard out, and it sounds like we do again today. So why don't we skip Creative Core for now, and we can just kind of get into some articles, unless you guys feel strongly about talking about writing horror.
I didn't even look at the topic, but I generally don't until the last second, so that my answers are more honest, and also because I'm lazy.
Yeah, I should dip into.
What would you think? I was carefully preparing my answers to Creative Corner.
you know, it either way works. It's always good responses, so I don't mind.
What was the topic for Creative Corner? Let's see.
You know, writing horror. You know, because last time we were talking about why horror matters to us, and I thought,
I didn't need to read that ahead of time. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't write horror on the horror website.
But yeah, we do have kind of a hard out. So why don't we just kind of get right into the articles?
That sounds like a good idea.
There was such a delay there. It's going to sound so good. No.
Because Grigori is recording for all of us for this episode, which means I need to make sure that my push to talk, my speak to talk, what's the opposite of push to talk? Help me out here. I just woke up. The thing where it picks up your voice. The thing where the microphone only transmits on Discord if you're talking, and if I just open the Coke can without starting to talk first, it won't pick it up, and then it won't be on the recording, and that's just unacceptable.
It would be a betrayal to our fans to establish protocols. Yeah, it's necessary.
It would be like a Paul is dead, Sgt. Pepper's Clue sort of thing, where people will be like, that episode's not real because there's no Coke can opening in it.
It's all engineered by AI. Oh boy.
Don't even get me started.
Yeah, no.
So articles.
Yeah, articles. So actually, Dysadron, I think we're going to start with yours, unless you don't want to start with yours.
I am more than happy to start off.
Okay. So yeah. So we each,
Oh,
just
do you
like
wanna
last
do the
time,
intro?
just
No,
like
we're gonna
base-
do that in Willa.
So just basic kind of outline sort of stuff. We all, just like last time, picked 2 or 3 or 4 in my case, but they're pretty short articles to talk about that are all kind of in one way or another horror based. So yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah. This first one you
Wait,
picked.
was meant to be- I picked pig articles again. Damn it! It happened twice in a row.
Oh my god, the pig articles are amazing.
Apparently, the only thing Dysadron is afraid of is pigs.
Well, they, fair.
It is fair. They're allowed to carry guns.
Hey,
cap.
that took me way too long.
A
Got
PAB.
'em.
A PAB. Anyway, I'm trying to think of how that acronym actually works. Yeah. All right. So we started off with Dysadron. You picked out "Apotheosis of the Rat" by Uranium Empire, which is a good segue from "All Cops Are Bastards" because this is about Ronald Reagan.
It's perfect. All Ronald Reagans are bastards.
Well, that's fucking true.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Maybe someone would make a hub so we could have all the Ronald Reagan articles in one place on the wiki.
Yeah, I can think of, I think at least 3.
There's quite a few. Why did I pick this one?
Because it's horrifying.
Firstly, it is. I mean, it's horrifying. It sure is horror. It is the tale of Ronald Reagan after becoming president, being taken to a gloomy, dark lair beneath the White House, where he meets spooky figures, shall we say, who are in large part connected to the American right and also Tsarist Russia. I chose this because it is just, as with all of Yui's work, beautifully written. The imagery is phenomenal, and the 3 icons of evil that Reagan ends up speaking to are each beautifully, again, there's that word again, beautifully crafted and unique, and they each have a very distinct voice and aesthetic, and it's incredibly unnerving throughout. What it essentially is, and I'd highly recommend that everyone gives this a read. It's a conversation, and not much happens beyond the discourse between the characters, and yet there is this tension, this unnerving atmosphere throughout it, which just leaves you by the end of the piece, even though nothing big has happened, nothing truly eventful has occurred. You just leave with this sense of dread in your stomach, and to conjure that up without actually doing much is incredibly skillful. It also, as with all of Uranium's articles, has an incredibly sharp political edge to it. It has something to say, and it's all the better for it. What did you two think of this?
It doesn't pull the punch on the stuff that it has to say. That's what I find always particularly good with Yui's stuff. It's just it is not afraid to make you step back and go, whoa.
Yeah, I really liked how this is that same thing that GW had said previously, like this logical extension. Like, so often the best articles, the best SCPs and tales are like, well, what if, here's the premise, and the premise here is, as we already stated, Ronald Reagan has just been inaugurated, and he gets taken down to a secret room beneath the White House to talk to the Illuminati or the powers that be, these 3, ancient, semi-immortal, disgusting corpse people. And how would you imagine that goes? Well, I imagine they all are pretty awful people. Yeah, well, how are they going to express that? Well, pretty obviously anti-Semitic, and also pretty obviously about like the fact that the push of Christianity needs to be the most important thing in Ronald Reagan's presidency, and what that means, and they're making like blood sacrifices to ancient deities, or they're discussing it anyway, pacts with ancient cabals of anti-Semitic conspiracies, and also the rant that's like about the fact that, like, how dare people think that Christianity is about the Jewish God, because that's ridiculous. You know, there's a quote: totalizing mission of Christ is not fought through feel-good sermons or some quote-unquote social gospel, but through crushing dominion over the secular humanist establishment. And I think my favorite part about this is how dumb and like sort of like sad and pathetic Reagan seems. Like he's like, oh, this is oh, I don't know, this is so, he's not offended by anything anyone's saying. He's more just horrified by how directly honest and horrible they are. But
yeah, like that's one of my favorite bits about it is at the very beginning he's just thinking, before all this happens to him, he's just thinking about deregulating oil, and at the end of it he's still just thinking about deregulating oil. He doesn't actually have any kind of like programmatic disjuncture with what these people want him to do. He's fine. Like the whole horrible thing goes on, right. And then he basically, like, they cart a statue of Moloch into his office and shit, and then he just continues doing what he was going to do anyway, because it's totally, they're fine with each other, really, because Reagan was terrible.
Yeah, I like that the ultimate message of this is that, you know, establishment Republicans, and to an extent Democrats, probably just hardcore worship the devil and sacrifice babies, you know, like, let's not, you know, I mean, like, they're just, let's just face it, you know, they're all just, the reason that the satanic panic was happened so they could distract themselves from the fact that they're the ones who want to, you know, worship the devil or whatever. It's just so, I love, like I said before, I love how it's just like, here's this premise, let's just keep going with it.
Yes,
and you're right, Dysadron, it's just a conversation, but the implications of this conversation are just like, wow, like, you're like, I come away from it horrified, of course, but also I knew it.
Yeah, and it's a concept that comes up in some of the other articles we'll talk today. The evil of the system, and how certain individuals can be viewed as just a cog in the machine. And yeah, well, that was a good observation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a comment, not every single article by Uranium Empire is about this, but it frequently comes up how the Western Democratic, in quotes, fairly right-wing Christianity-focused government has been pretty obviously against, you know, oppressed minorities, specifically often Jews, but also all sorts of other people. And the fact that informs UE's horror in so many ways it's refreshing, honestly, because you're right, it's political, but it doesn't really feel like there's much of a preachy edge to it. It's just like this observation through a lens of like horrific absurdity.
Right.
It's, you know, it's so good.
It's got a great title too, man.
Yeah.
Apotheosis of the rat of the rat.
It's good.
That's really good.
And I think it's not just the satanic panic, which is the mirror almost in the projection, but also if you consider, you know, old, I mean, it's not really that old, but blood libel and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. You have it in the article, the anti-Semitic ramblings and rants, as Phyllis Schlafly, I butchered that name, butchers herself a child. So there's a cleverness to it, right? And there's a cleverness in the imagery and the way the article is constructed.
There's also, you know, and this is kind of different, but the same in the sense that, like, how ironic it is that the first night of Ronald Reagan, the great fighter against the Cold War, the great warrior against Russia, was originally, you know, advised by a you know, a lich version of a czar, you know, Tsar Peter or whoever.
Nicholas, I believe.
Nicholas,
yeah.
Right, yeah, you're right, it's Nicholas. It's just like, that's so, because, you know, let's face it, like, you know, 20th century America is, you know, been fairly anti-Russia, obviously, since the communist thing, but, like, there's a lot of similarities between imperialist Russia and America throughout.
Oh yeah, unbelievably so.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, we've talked about it before, but it always kind of shocks me how underrated and
Yep.
like just not discussed uranium empires works are, like very commonly discussed amongst authors. This is only plus 57, and it's short, and it's incredibly well written, and it's just crazy.
It is. It's always really irritating to me to see the numbers over top of Yui's articles.
Yeah, because Yui's one of the few authors on the site that I regularly read things and just go, I'm just so jealous. Like, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how UA is able to, like, so frequently write something so readable, so fun in, you know, in a version of fun anyway, because they're obviously pretty hard hitting, but like they're always like so wonderfully throughout informed by, you know, this very specific messaging. And all of the trash fire that I've read so far has been like that, and it's
For sure.
it's just impressive as hell.
But to be so heavy sometimes in content and yet to still remain digestible and accessible, again, a credit to Yui's skill.
Yeah, and whimsically horrible, because this is
That's a good way to put it.
This is whimsical. Like, it's if you just describe what happens in this article, it's like, that's ridiculous, and then you read it, you're like, kind of oof, yeah, like, that's a good point. You know, it's really hard hitting, but it always just kind of feels wonderfully strange in like you said, a very digestible way.
Totally.
That's quite a good segue to the last point I'd like to make about the tale, which is, and I have no idea where this thought came from, so please don't question me on it. I read the article and was just lying in bed at night and had this imagery come through of the three, you know, the three evil ghouls of the tale as Saturday morning cartoon villains, or Adult Swim villains, or something. In that their description is so detailed,
Yes.
but also to such an extreme. You could really imagine it. I at least, and you can tell me if I'm crazy if it is. Could really imagine it kind of animated, and then their mouths kind of moving up and down, kind of, you know, low budget kids cartoon way.
Totally.
Yeah, I
No
could
idea
also
where that
imagine
thought
them.
came from.
I could also see it as a Venture Brothers sort of thing, for sure.
Oh yeah, or like early 20th century like political cartoons that used to appear in the newspapers and stuff, like, which is
they were often really horrifying too. So
right, and like really horribly racist. And what's, again, this is Yui using the tactics of like the horrible oppression of media to like depict like actually the people in power are the people that are the monsters, which, you know, surprises none of us, I'm sure.
No, not at all.
But okay, the next one you picked was SCP-7808 by Notorious, and it is personnel requirements. And I had not read this one before, and it is fucking incredible.
Nice
It's
brand
so
new
good.
article too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read this, and it's definitely the last article I read, which, you know how sometimes you open up new pages, you click on something in Chrome LC, which is like a Discord bot which lists out the most recently created articles, and you go in with no expectations and no idea of what it is that you're about to read, and just lose yourself in a fantastic article. It's one of my favorite experiences on the wiki, and you can't engineer it, you can't manufacture a situation in which that happens, except for reading and reading regularly. And yeah, this is an article in which, I mean, Grigori, do you have an elevator pitch already written out for it, or would you like me to give it?
I do, yeah. So
Go for it. I don't want to steal your thunder.
this is written in this
He lives for
very
this.
sloppy. Yeah, I mean, I do like kind of just giving the basic pitch and then kind of expanding upon it. So this is written in this very sloppy way, but it's written in a sloppy way specifically because there's a notice at the front that says the following files under unreviewed by senior containment specialists. And what's implied throughout is that the Foundation is having like significant shortage of personnel, that they're like overwhelmed by the amount of anomalies, and they've assigned this very junior researcher to what they think is just a safe anomaly, which is a small ring that magnetically or anomalously attracted to hands. Once it gets on you, it stabs several spines into your finger and starts to suck the life out of, and then footnote says marrow, blood, out of you. It's currently attached to Audrey's hand and containment, just Audrey's hand in cell 81-A4, a floor above my office, which is all written by Logan Ayers. They're super short-staffed, so they're basically just assigning it randomly, or not randomly, but they think, oh well, this is a junior researcher, it's safe, this should be fine. And he tries to get on the SkipNet and to discuss with the director, and he threatens to kill the director, which gets a prompt and is weirdly understanding because of the situation that they're in, and then says, okay, if you want to be reassigned, just contact your researcher. And most of this happens in this sort of text exchange. It's a very short article, and I just want to read a little bit of it. The Logan is saying, well, I'm guessing that the object's magnetic pull gets stronger over time. We woke up one morning with a hole in our ceiling and a ring on her finger. After that, it was just a matter of days before she bled out. And the supervising researcher's like, did you try cutting off the hand? To which Logan doesn't respond, just is ellipsis. And then the senior researcher is like, Logan, what happened? Well, I requisitioned a saw from the medical department, but they were so backed up they couldn't deliver our request. So we got the biggest, heaviest metal door we could find and slammed it on her hand over and over again until it got mangled to the point we could pull it off. The senior researcher, only response is, did it work? And it immediately went to the other hand. So this is it's really just one. It's such a series 1 style thing. There's this ring that gets attracted to fingers, and then it bleeds you out. The premise is kind of whatever. It's the way that it's handled in this. The horror of it, I think personally, is the nonchalant, bureaucratic way that they're treating this. This is clearly not just another researcher, but Logan's, partner. And Audrey's now dead because this ring was, assessed poorly as safe, that it could pop itself through a containment lab and into a fucking domicile like that.
Rest in peace, Audrey.
Yeah, poor Audrey.
So what did you want to say about your pick?
You've hit the nail on the head there, Grigori, as to one of the reasons why I really, really like this article. And it was what you said about it being Series 1-esque in terms of you have that premise, and the premise is it's a ring and it makes you bleed, and
right.
Okay, cool. And then it's what you do with it. I think the most obvious comparison to me is to SCP-4183, which is, I think it's a vase which, if you look at it, it exsanguinates you and you lose all your blood, or something to that effect. But then the story that's told is these 3 containment robots who, who are looking after this vase in a post-apocalyptic society where humanity has gone extinct. Yeah, I'm guessing that was a noise of recognition.
Yes, I do remember it now. Yeah.
And it's not the anomaly isn't interesting, but how it's used and deployed. And it sounds like such an easy concept to do. You write an anomaly and then just tell a story around it without really deploying it to that great an extent. But it's actually a really tricky skill. I've tried to do it several times, failed on every attempt. So it's one of those things which, if you do it well, it looks masterfully easy. So really, really impressed with that. I'm not sure if this is maybe a cheat submission from mine, in that I'm not sure I'd call it horror, but it's certainly horrifying.
Oh, it counts.
And
it definitely counts.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last time. I feel like anything that is, informed by horror, because this is clearly the person who wrote this is certainly aware of the horror vocabulary, even if they didn't set out to tell a story that was scary. It's disturbing, certainly.
And similar to Apotheosis, there's a political aspect to this, right? It can be seen as a commentary on a variety of things, from workplace safety regulations, what work takes from us, the ethics of the workplace. And then I discussed this in one of the SCP Discord channels to quite an extent when it first came out, and the author was there too, and someone asked the author if they were English, and as you may be able to tell by accent, I indeed am from England. Thank you for your apologies in advance. It was a question that I was wondering as well, and the author of this piece was not from the UK, but we're currently going through a political situation of incredibly long wait times for ambulances, incredibly long wait times in A&E, potentially the return of, well, not so much potentially, but the return of austerity and cuts to public spending, public services.
Right.
And I read this and was immediately thinking that it was an allegory for how, when you cut budgets and stuff, the people suffer and people ultimately die, and that wasn't the intention with this piece, but death of the author and all that stuff. So
it's definitely what it's about, whether it was meant to be about it or not.
I think in the author post they mention it's to do with workplace safety, and is it OSHA you have in the US? Mm-hmm. There we go, something along those lines. So interconnected ideas for sure.
Yeah, it's the reason OSHA got made in the first place was that workplace safety was kind of barely a concern, for employees. It's still not strong enough in many ways, like most federal things that protect employees in the US. But, the idea is, why was that necessary in the first place? Well, the organization doesn't care enough about the safety and livelihood of its employees. It treats the employees like assets. And even if you don't realize that what you're trying to tell a story when you use that sort of, informed by that sort of thing, is, bureaucracies and corporations and overall big hierarchical organizations don't give a shit about the little person. And just the fact that, the senior researcher is aware that Audrey's dead, and just wants to know the details. Oh, did you try cutting off the hand? And this told this horrible fucking story about how they took a metal door and slammed it until it collapsed the bones in her hand. They could slip the ring off. Just the torture of imagining that situation. And if the author had actually described it in detail, this would have been obviously a piece of horror. And then their only response is, did it work? No, motherfucker. I already said she's dead. No.
Well, we need to know so we can, add it to the con procs. If slamming your hand in the door over and over again will work, that we need to be able to put that in there just in case.
What about a window?
Just the idea that the person tries to get a medical saw, but sorry, we can't. There's layers to the fact that this organization is so backed up that it can't even give a shit about its employees, to the point where you can't even cut off your spouse's or partner's hand when it's cursed with a bleed ring or whatever, with a medical saw, which is already, if that had to happen, that's already horrible. But no, that couldn't even work. We've got to use a metal door.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of stuff about how the Foundation is hard up for cash, which seems like something somebody would have. It comes up occasionally, but you think it would be something that people play with a little bit more, and this is a good example of it.
Yeah, I know people are like, I see the complaint of, Foundation bad. Yeah, we get it. That's what, there's a reason authors keep coming back to that, because let's face it, it's a big,
they are bad,
global conspiracy, and that's what is that representative of? That's bad stuff, obviously. But I thought this was a really fun twist on that, even if it wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
But it's not that they're bad because it's just they're bad because they're just understaffed and don't give a shit enough about their employees.
And I think as well, there's I mean, it's always entertaining to see the Foundation as the villain. But returning to kind of the style of the article, I don't know about you two, but I always struggle when I'm writing to think about what the best way to tell my story is, and I'll often go through several redrafts of showing something as a log, showing something as an interview, showing it as an email chain, XYZ, all of these things which you see throughout the wiki, which you can deploy and have the advantage of the reader knowing exactly kind of what it is and how to follow it, etc. And this works. And this thought kind of came to me as you were talking, Griggs. This works really, really well in having it being relayed to the reader and to the supervisor post event. And I don't think it would. There's almost the bluntness of yep, got the biggest, heaviest door, slammed it on her hand.
Yeah.
Were you to be doing that through a real-time video log, I don't know why it would lose some of the impact, but for me it would definitely lose a lot of that impact, and it's such a strong way to end the article.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, I think we maybe did, but there's kind of two audiences for horror. There's the people that really just want to see the crazy kills, and because they just think it's like, oh, wow, they like gore and, oh, look at that, crazy.
I love this character. Can this be a recurring character?
I mean, it always blows me away when people are like, wow, I like horror, and then they just start listing off these movies that I'm like, oh, those are terrible. Like, why did you like that? Well, because then Jason, takes the machete. Okay, all right, I get it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that if you sat there and described in real time this person crushing his partner's hand in a metal door in the most graphic depiction possible, I think I'd be creeped out, but I would be more just like rolling my eyes. Whereas the deadpan delivery of like, so then we did this, is worse because now I'm just imagining it, which is so much worse than actually reading it.
Yeah, because it's delivered as somebody who has been through something horrible and is just dully and angrily describing it.
Yeah, like numb except for, resentment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Firstly, echoing Harry's comments on the voices, more of those, please. I think it's where
oh wow!
I think it's the horror of the situation and the horror of the article. It doesn't derive from the door being slammed on the hand, right? So by showing that, you're not really gaining anything. There's no benefit to it. The horror is coming from the world building, and I didn't mention that at the start. Actually, fantastic world building in this, done in a very concise amount of words.
Yeah.
Like the horror is kind of what led to this point, and the kind of so cold reaction afterwards of everyone involved. And yeah, I think that's why it works as it does. I answered my own question. That's where the impact comes from.
No, yeah, it's great. I don't know if Notorious has done a lot of articles, but this feels like a really great weaponization of being like a little bit unsure how to write an SCP. Because if this was just perfectly clinical all the way through, it would lose something. This is more effective because it's written in this kind of slapdash way, because you're communicating how messed up Logan is by this, and the fact that there's no one here to like look over his stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wonder, is this a case of this is an early SCP written by somebody and they went, I don't totally have a handle on it, but I have a great idea for how to write an article where the person who's writing it doesn't totally have a handle on it, or whether they totally have a handle on it and they knew that they could do a good format screw by writing it this way. Either way, it worked out really well.
Yeah. I mean, it works great either way. The execution.
I would assume they do know.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's easier to just screw something up when you already know how it works correctly.
Yeah, because there's a real subtlety to the.
That's what I do with the podcast, right? I know how it's supposed to go. That's why I'm so perfectly capable of interfering with it and talking over people and derailing the conversation. Because I'm an expert, not because I'm lazy.
Right, of course not.
That just helps.
Also, you started to say something, Dysadron, before we move on to the next one, about the way that we convey information in SCPs and how often we kind of see that. And it's not a complaint, it's just we have a limited repertoire of things that we can use to describe things. Is this going to be a log, a video log? Is there an interview? Is it just, prose text kind of summarizing? This is, I've seen it a couple times, but this idea that it's like very immersively just showing us exactly what that person would see on the screen in the SkipNet. Although it does look like the UI from 1984. But, whatever. The point is it's got a very immersive angle to it, it feels like you're actually watching this person trying to search for assistance through this horribly understaffed and underutilized inner site communication system. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we go to classic author SCP-2529 by Callanan, Rest in Peace, which is SCP-2529 is a phenomenon primarily affecting electronic devices used to access information on an unsolved multiple homicide discovered in the late 1990s in Fordingham County, Vermont. Electronic devices used to access accounts of the events of the occurrence, as well as speculation and discussion concerning the occurrence itself, the identities and condition of remains discovered, or what party or parties may have been responsible, will anonymously cease operation despite the lack of any discernible mechanical or electronic defects. In the course of observing the anomaly, effects during experiment blah 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 blah, with typing information related to the occurrence into a Microsoft Word 97 document, the following series of images open spontaneously using Word 97 pinball, a hidden game embedded in the word processor. And this is like the last one. It's such a basic premise and can so easily be kind of dismissed as okay, so this is an anomalous thing where it's erasing stuff that's about this homicide. Okay, what's your point? But without these images, which are so wonderfully done, that and there's 9 of them, and they're very quick, sort of screenshots of messages that a ghost in the machine or whatever is saying, and it is really excellently haunting. So, Dysadron, what did you... Yeah, go for it.
What did I think of this? I think it is worth prefacing this with saying there is an element of this one which, and it's certainly not a criticism, is of its time. I think it's nearly a 7-year-old article, but I find it. So I think were you to write an article on this nowadays, it would be, I think, very different. But I think it still stands up really well, and I think in and of itself, I think time. The reason I say that is time is very important to why I picked this one. So I think nearly 7 years old, still incredibly pertinent in terms of the subject matter, and if anything, even more so now than when it was written, in terms of a commentary and on true crime communities and the internet's obsession with mysteries and unsolved mysteries. And there's a high profile missing persons case in the UK right now. Earlier on this year, end of last year, there was a high profile unsolved, now solved, I believe, murder of several individuals in a kind of house in the US somewhere. Apologies, I forget the exact details.
Oh, that could be anywhere,
so
at any time.
It doesn't matter. The states are all the same. They just pretend otherwise.
Oh.
Americans are like, hey, my house 5 feet away from that other house is completely different because it's in Nebraska instead of Omastan or whatever.
Omastan.
And so kind of the idea of this anomaly playing with information and the transference of information from one party to another, I think is quite interesting. And then the images at the end are really freaky. And the text of them doesn't do that much for me. It's, you know, it's better to sleep. All children should sleep. I wish my children would sleep. I mean, frankly, that just sounds like a new mum of twins or triplets or something, as opposed to a murder kind of associated thing. But the image, as you mentioned, Grigori, is of a Microsoft Word 97 pinball interface with a bit of text on the side and a photo of a woman's face. And I was looking at this image and was really curious as to where that image had come from. And if you look in the licensing section and you see where it's derived from, it is from a what's the word to describe it? So it's a reconstruction of, it's a digital facial reconstruction of a murder victim from an unsolved crime. And if you open it up and you look at it on, you know, let me pop this link in our chat so you can see all of them.
I'm looking at them now, and it's unsettling.
Incredibly creepy. And the place where they were the murder victims, it's for those listening, it's a picture of 4 victims, 1 adult, 3 children. And it's all very uncanny valley, which is then just amplified by the creepiness of the context. And it's based on a real murder, which 4 victims were identified in 1985, and then 2 were identified in 85, and then it took them 15 years to find the other 2 victims a short distance away. And this happened in New Hampshire. And then the article which we're talking about, 2529, is based within Vermont, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe are geographically
very close,
in a close vicinity.
Yeah.
It's where Bob Newhart owns an inn.
What I find really interesting, and this is where the timeliness comes in. So I didn't catch the geography joke, so I just ignored it.
No, don't worry about it. Nobody will catch it.
That reference is for no one.
The first person who catches that reference, please email us.
What do they win?
I expect to get a response 2 years from now. They win the award of being the oldest person listening to the podcast.
Also, this message is for Jackal, who I just said to someone else that I am in my 50s. No, I'm not. Anyway.
I mean, incredibly pertinent, as Jackal actually remade the images that we're looking at as part of the licensing revamp. Right, what am I saying here, guys? Help me along.
No, but so you're right. Article... The images are what make this, and it's like so many articles from pre-2018, aiming for and succeeding at a real fridge horror, because the text leading up to it is all context, and then you get these images that are these kind of haunting, but then you start to think, oh my god, did she kill her kids, or is she just talking about how it's better that her kids are dead? It's just creepy as fuck.
And okay, I've got back to where I was interested in before the Simply Creative People prize game show competition hour. This article was published by Kalinin in July 2016 on this unsolved murder which had been going on since 1985. And when he published this, and I'm not sure what Kalinin's pronouns are, apologies if I got those wrong, I'll default to they. When they published this, it was unsolved, and they didn't know who this anonymous woman from the facial reconstruction photo was. And then a few months later, half a year later, in spring of 2017, they announced, the authorities announced that they think that they have a suspect in mind for who potentially was the perpetrator in the case, and they identify them. And then it's 2019, so 3 years after the article is created, and this image of the digital reconstruction is used in the article and put into word pinball, where the authorities in real life identify who the victims in the cold case are, and are able to kind of trace living family and stuff. And I just found it's a good article in and of itself, and I really enjoyed it, and the images make it. But then digging a little bit more into these images and finding kind of the context and kind of the story behind it, I found really fascinating, and kind of a really good example of how SCP articles or tales or whatever, which are always based on
True crime,
always based on real life events, kind of go one of two ways, right? In that it detracts from it, or it really, really benefits it, and it's polarized, and there's very little, in my opinion, very little grey area in between.
Yeah.
And for this one, I find it really, really interesting, and that kind of trajectory that the case has been on over the course of the lifetime of the article, and how actually kind of building in the Kalanins's done very well at building in the similarities and the likeness between the fictional and the real life case without overplaying it. And yeah, I've reached the end of my train of thought on that one. But yes, very just interesting context and background I thought to the images used within this article.
No, absolutely. Knowing that, I hadn't clicked. I didn't realize any of that. It just adds. It just adds. It's so haunting. Even more so because it's connected to a real unsolved murder, and it just kind of deepens that feeling of like quiet unsettling.
It, on the other hand, did not even remotely pass the Kalanin threshold, not even by a mile.
What is the Kalanin threshold again?
It's a thing people won't shut up about, even though it's stupid, where Kalanin said any article that's an SCP that didn't pass 50 in a year should be deleted. This article didn't pass 50 in 2 years, so it shouldn't actually exist.
That's a dumb idea.
Look at us doing background research on these articles. 2 different types, but still two interesting points.
I'll do background research as long as it's drama.
But we do have a hard out, so let's keep going. So Harry, we're gonna switch to your picks.
I think we should switch to yours, because that way it doesn't matter if I get cut off, because I won't mind, and we can just do mine again in a third episode.
We literally didn't do yours last time.
Yeah, but that's fine, because I'm the guy who doesn't know horror very well.
But you picked really good ones. So
I did pick really good ones, but I think we should do yours.
Oh my god, fine. I'm not gonna waste time arguing.
See, it's good. I can use the time limit against you.
That's right.
The time limit. The time limit was 2.5 hours. We never go over 2.5 hours.
We do all the time. But anyway,
we're already 50 minutes in, which is slightly scary.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the true horror, the passage of time.
That's true.
This is
It's just real.
a permanent third co-host.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're never leaving.
We just have to keep extending this episode into 3 episodes or 4 episodes.
All right, so we'll do my picks. That's fine. So first one I picked was SCP-3914, which is necrocapitalism, which in a lot of ways is such a me article. It's ridiculous. This is an author. This is an author called Young Meme, which I was not familiar with, but this is a great. It's kind of an old-fashioned article in some ways, but it's really, really, really terrific. Basically, the premise is Amazon's board of directors are all anomalous, and in some way or another are connected to manipulation of people through like physicality, so like reanimating corpses to make them into mindless automatons, or reanimating corpses to make them kind of independent automatons.
So what's the anomaly though?
The anomaly is
what's the part that's not real?
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. As the seats are vacated, the successors inherit these anomalous effects. So it's something to do with the board. So like pretty clearly, like, hey, guess what? Amazon is evil. Which when was
News.
this? Yeah. When was this? This is 2018. So I feel like that was just becoming very obvious to all of us.
Just slightly ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And the way that this is handled is pretty straightforward. It's a table that kind of goes through each of the 9 board of directors and what their anomalies are. And it turns out the reason that they even find out is because the board was trying to infiltrate the Foundation by killing and then reanimating an MTF agent. But my favorite part is how, this is all allegory, okay? How evil is this massive corporation? And then it gets to the end, and the way that Amazon is taking direct action against the Foundation, because they're clearly not containing them, is to like get in the way of their supply chain and like interfere with their ability to get like important containment technologies, or even just like basic, supplies for the way that the sites work. Not to mention the fact that several cemeteries near the Foundation sites have had like significant grave robbing incidents,
right,
where apparently they think Amazon is either trying to like gain info by reanimating Foundation agents, as if the Foundation is just like, yeah, we're just gonna bury them in the next door graveyard, or trying to like create an army to like mess with the nearby Foundation sites. It's just this like, it's surprising no one that the first article I pick is about how capitalism is evil. But like, it's such a just like apotheosis of the rat. It's like, okay, well, what's your premise? Your premise is that the board of directors at Amazon are evil, like necromancy anomaly liches or whatever. And then like, let's just like go nuts with it.
I'm trying to think of an acronym which is SCP, which could be used for the next door graveyard to every site. And obviously the C could be a cemetery, but if I get past that point, I'll come back to you. Yeah, I similar to you, loved the ending of this, because it's, we're having to deal with this super evil monopoly that keeps on buying up everything, etc., etc. And what does the Foundation decide to do? The Foundation decide that due to strain put on Foundation resources by these economic attacks, they've issued a formal request to O5 Command to purchase the remaining supplies, bringing production directly into Foundation control. If you can't beat them, join them. Just, try and create your own monopoly and, stifle the marketplace and all of that stuff. And kind of this was, and this is another one, right, of system versus individuals. And I was really surprised by, as you go down the list, the table of all of the board members, and it gives you the board member name and the date they joined Amazon and then what their anomalous ability is. They save Jeff Bezos till last, and you kind of go down and you're like, oh, I can't wait to see what it is, and then it's none. Jeff Bezos appears to be a SCP-3914A instance used as a public figurehead. And part of me, in my own head canon, all of these board members are Amazon zombies, and no one knows actually who's behind it or where the thing started off.
Right.
And I think I read this and the bit about Bezos, and kind of initially had this like, that really, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that in terms of like an absolving of responsibility. And I think for me and my tastes and interests, I'm fine with it. But I thought it's an interesting. Then went to the discussion page, and there's a few people who have talked about it there. But yeah, I thought this was really good, really well written, and another kind of example of doing something very heavily based on the real world, but not. But that does stand well on its own as an article.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I would say, usually I would be all for ostracizing and demonizing the person who's actually behind it. In this case, Jeffrey Bezos. But I probably wouldn't have written it this way, but I like that the way that the author decided to like completely undermine any importance to Bezos, because this is a very funny way of saying he's really stupid.
Yep. Yeah.
You know why he's stupid? He's a zombie automaton. That's why he's
it's like Jeff Bezos is not the mastermind of anything.
Which, I mean, in the real world is unfortunate how often stupid people have lots and lots of money. But
Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. And Bezos.
And Jeff Bezos. Yeah.
But yeah, this is just another example of, when people complain about quote unquote politics in SCP, and it's just like there's so many good examples of funny, kind of disturbing, because this is both. This isn't horror in a traditional sense. Again, it's more just the implication of like, if we sat there and actually described this, these board meetings, or the fact that they're raising up, armies of the undead, but the only reason they're doing it is to staff their warehouses. There's this really hilarious kind of tongue-in-cheek satire to it, like all the good horror. I think like most of the good horror out there, honestly. And it's so often, like we talked about in the first episode, horror and comedy are so often the subject matter, the genres that like directly, hold up a mirror to society.
Right.
And this does that, really well, in a very, obvious and preachy way, but in a way that is stupidly funny. It's just like, what? They're zombies and they're making other zombies? This is what?
Right.
And anything that shows the horrors of capitalism is pretty fun. Because
it has that sort of VKTM feel to it.
Almost, yeah.
Like the comedic over the top criticism of capitalism, although it doesn't have the plausible deniability that you always slide in there, so you can go, what? It's not about capitalism, it's about media.
There's nothing. Victim has never done a political thing in their life.
It's never political at all. And there's also a bit of, even though we didn't know about it at the time, a bit of the procurement and liquidation department stuff that we worked on.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't know about this, to be honest.
Same.
Because that second one that Ep helped me write, which was directly about
taking over the
online marketplaces, I don't know if I would have written it. And even though it's very different, I sometimes get a little bit scared away from an idea if I see something too similar. I think we're all a little bit like that.
Yeah, my very first one would not have been written if I'd actually known about the extremely famous mirror monster that everybody knows about.
Right. But yeah, when I was reading this, I was like, oh god, I wish I could like find this author and be like, hey, can we make this P&L? Because this would fit really well. Yeah, for sure, right? Especially the idea of them trying to beat Amazon at their own game at the end, sort of thing. But yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know, Harry and I last year, as part of the what contest was that for? Was that?
It was the department contest. You and I and Ip.
Wrote about, and it was Ip's idea, and it was a great idea, the procurement and liquidation department, which is about people that handle anomalies and the containment of anomalies purely through like economic means. And we had a fucking blast writing. I mean, I think we ended up doing like 7 articles, and now
we did a whole bunch.
Now there's 10. I still got to ask for a tag, but
I still reference it every once in a while.
Me too. All right, let us move on to something by Robertson, who is an author I really, really like. I like a lot of their stuff. I know they're not really around anymore, and they can be a little controversial, but I really like their writing a lot. And this is Theogenesis by Robertson. It's a tale. It's a man who has like a haunting dream, and when he wakes up, he's inspired to write a book of short stories. And after he publishes it, he gets sort of like immediately accosted by some strange people, demanding that he explain the nature of the book and and to explain the secrets of it. And he has no idea what they're talking about. And as the story progresses, he talks to more and more people who have read the book, and they all feel like they're being watched. He gets letters from fans asking him to join in with the attempt to welcome the quote-unquote true gods as they descend. And he's basically like opened this door to an eldritch horror. It's got a very classic strange fiction feel to it, but in a very modern way, I think. And there's just this really great kind of, it's a bit of a spoiler, but like I think the journey is the ride, is the point here. He's basically being talked to by this whatever it is, and as you're beginning to understand, said the voice, "What have you done to me? I've done nothing. You came to me. You found me in the folds of the universe. This is the consequence of your act." And again, his act was just to write a book of short stories. And I just think there's something so wonderfully early 20th century, creepy, the warnings against being too curious, and maybe a discussion of the dangers of being in the creative world.
Right. Yes, it's not safe, so everybody stay out and don't compete with us.
Yeah, just don't. It's terrible. Don't do it. And then you don't create for a little while, and then you feel guilty because you haven't been creating. It's bad. Don't write books. So what did you guys think about this one?
I really enjoyed it. I think my favorite interpretation of and deployment of Fifism is anything which is true to the original vibes of SCP-1425.
Mm-hmm.
It's classic, standard eldritch horror, but done really, really well. It's a slightly basic comparison to make when something is eldritch and also to do with writing, but I, at times, got quite strong in the mouth of madness vibes from the piece. I thought my favourite part was towards the beginning. I thought that the standout scene was when he is initially accosted by strangers within his home, demanding what the book means and demanding that he reads their scrawled notes within the margin. And the characters aren't named. I'm not sure actually that any of the characters are named.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Within the piece, but the visiting characters aren't with us for that long a time, and I was kind of waiting for them to come back as the piece went on, and they never do. I'm constantly left disappointed. But they're not with us. The scene doesn't last that long a time, but each of the three characters introduced for that short stay, I thought were quite well defined within the confines of the word count, and they each stood out. They had their own idiosyncrasies and were all people that I would never ever want to find in my house late at night, and alone, as individuals, let alone all three of them together.
Do you have a tier list for the ones you would want to just show up in your house?
They all beat you two. No offense.
Aww.
Yeah, I really like. There's a lot of really good characterization here, with a lot of Ruinson's writing, honestly. Everything I've read, anyway. And there's this real sense of like the hapless. I don't even know how to describe our protagonist, but like he's the one that's opened the door to this, or they. Actually, I don't know if it's ever clear which gender. The author is, sort of facilitating unknowingly some terrible fifth god coming into our reality. And my favorite part is how consistently people are like, "You didn't know?" Like they got a knife to him, and like the reason that they don't hurt him is because he has no fucking idea. He's not a liar. He's just an idiot. There's no point in staying. We should just leave. Like, that scene seems like it's going to go real bad. He's being accosted by strangers in his house who are clearly obsessive, who are maybe part of a cult. It's pretty unclear. And they are inspired by his horrible book. And that is the opening premise to, like, a Stephen King novel. Like, a writer in Maine, because it has to be Maine, gets accosted by fans, and then things go bad. But then no, they just kind of leave him alone because he's not even useful for them. And each person that he talks to who has some weird experience with his own work, he is kind of like, oh, that's crazy. He's so hapless and like kind of brain dead that it's very clear that he's just been used as this conduit for this thing, which is, you know, like some of the other ones we've talked about today, it's not like directly scary, although that scene where the people are in his house is really pretty tense. But it has this, like you said, in the Mouth of Madness kind of feel where you're just like, this is very much derived and informed by other things that are traditionally Eldritch horror, and this is kind of like, let's take that and tell a story that's very character based, and that's it's really effective, I think.
Yeah.
And linking it back to two of the things we've already talked about in terms of he's not evil, just an idiot. I mean, I think that's maybe too kind of a judgment to give to Ronald Reagan, but you know, there's similarities there. And then with regards to the piece we talked about, I've forgotten both the name, personnel requirements.
Oh yeah.
Just this feeling of just being resigned to the situation you're in, and there's nothing you can do about it, so you might as well just get on with it and swear at your boss / write a book, because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, because it ends with him being like, well, I guess I gotta write more. And I feel like it's just a great allegory in general for the relationship that we all have with our creative outlet.
No, mine's entirely healthy.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I have absolutely no hang-ups and problems at all. Thank God I had something to say so I could open my Coke can.
But anyway, all right. And that one, you know, I mean, I've kind of given away the point of the story, but like a lot of tales, it's sort of how it's executed that it really works, and the individual instances of this person discussing his own creative work with people, I think is totally worth reading. And it's not, it doesn't even have to be connected to Fiftism. If it hadn't been tagged it, I wouldn't have even necessarily assumed.
Yeah.
But it fits, because that's very much what Fiftism is inspired by, that in Scientology.
Fiftism is a really good example of why the tags are important, because you'd never be able to figure out most articles that are Fifthist if they weren't tagged.
Yeah, especially the tales.
Like 50% of them, you're like, oh, it's Fifthist. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like such good context, because you get to the end, you look at the tag, and go, oh, that's why it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Okay, all right.
I get it.
Got it. All right, let's move on to another Uranium Empire article,
Yes.
which this one is absolutely disgustingly underrated. It is at plus 30.
Like, this is obnoxious. Well, what the fuck is wrong with everybody?
This is a really great article.
It's fantastic.
It's not short, but it's not like horrifically long either. It's just so, I don't understand.
No, I really cannot even begin to comprehend what's going on there.
And this one has a link back to another article which we discussed last time, which was the Pigs on Top of Pigs article, the Only Ironworks, which is a, it's referred to as a GOI, but it doesn't have like a tag. It's just something that UE is used a few times, where it's like this very industrial, horror, but not the way the factory is. It's just like this kind of like meaningless, impersonal, rusting machinery sort of setting. But it's a subterranean complex of indeterminate size, accessible through series of abandoned industrial facilities throughout the United States of America. And these are all sites, I think they're all sites that are owned or were operated by Only Ironworks. And over time, it's expanded significantly, the process of which is poorly understood. While models of growth appear similar to those of, and insert anomaly, expansion appears to coincide with middle-class economic anxiety on the surface. So
it's a great sentence.
It's just so good. I mean, there's just so much there that Yui's saying without, going into significant detail. Like, okay, so as our anxiety in Western society about how the middle class is disappearing, this horrible endless maze of rusting machinery keeps expanding.
Go figure, right?
Right. And then it is unknown whether or not the anomaly is attracted to or serves as an active vector of such anxieties. I feel like that's... Come on. Those existing in defiance of consensus typology, which is pretty cool. Instead of saying non-Euclidean geometry, that was a pretty great way of saying this is a weird place. Portions of the anomaly may solidify into place, creating a reliable network of spatially impossible tunnels. And agents is recovered...
it's the back rooms.
But yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, it is kind of.
It's probably written before the fucking backrooms came out. It's in Series 5. It's relatively old. It's a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't know when the backrooms... I don't think so. Either way, it's pretty close.
I was just being stupid. The comparison is totally extremely facile, and there's no comparison to be made there.
That's relevant though. I mean, because in the sense of like the feeling of
it's a liminal spaces that it's an endless linked liminal spaces. But it's also it's more directly urban exploration sort of.
Yeah,
field.
Absolutely. I'm surprised there's not. Yui should have gotten in contact with fucking Great Hippo to get some really creepy pipes.
Yeah, there is a hippo vibe to the whole thing.
Absolutely. It's a really not a long, but like a series of like kind of logs. They kind of go in backwards because we see this agent recovered and is interviewed like pretty much right after being recovered, after being lost for like I think like 19 days down in these whatever, these tunnels. And then we kind of go backwards and we get to fill in the blanks of what happened to them in these tunnels. We get like a voice log, and then we get like these little memos that he's made and videos, and it's really masterfully done. There's quite a few collapsibles, but they just flow so well, and it's just so endlessly creepy. But to the point where like when there is like this tentacled monster shows up, like that's not even the scary part. The scary part is this like endless kind of mind-numbingly upsetting like series of drippy rusting machinery and the impersonality of industry on people and whatnot. It's just just another crazy surreal horror connected to the trash fire by Yui, and it's just shocking to me that it's at 30. It's disgusting. I hope everyone that listens to this goes and clicks through the link in the description and please go read it.
It is one of the cooler examples of the exploration log kind of article, to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and I don't want to say much more on that because I don't want to give much of it away. It's kind of a crazy journey.
It's great.
Yeah,
go read it.
Yeah, I read it when it came out, and then I read it right now before, not right now, but in the lead up to this podcast.
Grigori's been reading it the whole time, and he's been talking. He's a lawyer. He can multitask. He has to do this kind of thing all the time. Thinks on his feet.
I'm so bad at that. That's why I take notes. That's not good at that.
Grigori is mainly, he does things on the fly. He doesn't plan it out. He doesn't prepare ahead of time. He knows that he'll do a better job if he just wings it.
That's right. Oh my god. I have been told I actually am good at that, but I'm so anxious when I wing it that I try never to, like, ever.
Yes, that'll be. Everybody has one thing that everybody tells them they're very good at that they don't like doing and would not do under any circumstances if they could choose to not do it. And I guess that's your thing, is winging it.
Yeah, like I mean, because in my profession and going to grad school, I'm sure you found this as well. There's a lot of moments where you're sort of expected to talk to a group of people, and when you are not as well prepared as you would like, that is just a horrible feeling.
Oh, it was nightmarish for me when I started grad school and was a teaching assistant. I was like, oh my God, I can't handle it. And then it eventually taught me to learn how to do that, which was extremely valuable.
Yeah,
I didn't hear a lot of moments though. I heard a lot of mullets. I was wondering what hipster grad school you had been to.
Oh yeah, hipsters and mullets. Those are two things that go together.
I basically did have a mullet, yeah. So that's a good coincidence.
Business up front, party in the back.
Yes. I mean, right now it's party all around. My hair is like 3 feet long at this point.
Oh my God.
Maybe not quite, but it goes down real far. I'm the hippiest of the three of us. It doesn't even matter what the other two look like.
My office just closed because no one goes in there. Everyone works.
Because my hair was too long.
No, but the reason I have kept like trim and like has been because I got to go in the office. I didn't go in all the time because I work from home a bunch, but
yeah.
It would be a reason to be like, oh, hair's getting a little too long, I should get it cut. And now I'm just like, oh no.
Okay.
I'm just gonna, who cares?
Yep.
Well, I'll care once it gets warm again. But anyway, all right, so let's move on. The last one is another article that was published during Anthology, and it is not underrated, but I just fucking love it so fucking much.
I'm so happy to see how it got rated. I'm so pleased because I was worried. I helped crit this one, and I was worried it was going to be deleted.
I didn't think it was going to be deleted.
So cool.
But I was worried about its reception because it is a little. It's not long at all. In fact, it's incredibly short.
Which is actually usually a problem because that means it has to stand on its merits in a short time frame, and people can find a lot more problems. More people will read the article if it's shorter, and more people who read articles that are only short are critical.
Yeah.
It's a Calibold article. It's SCP-7179 by Calibold. E is for Eternity.
Yeah.
And Cal takes risks.
Absolutely.
Cal will publish articles that can be deleted if the reception doesn't go right, because Cal will have crazy ideas, and sometimes other people don't like them. I've never read anything by Cal I didn't like. But...
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Calibold
You're on a League of Legends.
So for
but I like that for what it was, because everybody's like, this is an article on the SCP wiki that's telling a story. It's like, no, it's not. This is an attack on the people who are reading it, and it worked perfectly.
It was so funny. It was so funny.
For people, an act of prime trollery.
For people that maybe don't know, for the 7,000 contest, Calibold and his friend Scherf wrote an article. It's very controversial, so much so that it got as many I think it was like 50-50 there for I think
it was pretty close.
Yeah, like there's hundreds and hundreds of votes on it, but it's really, I think it's like barely over 100 now, because so many people downvoted it and so many people upvoted it, so much so that Cal and his friend Trevor made an award for themselves in one of those like high school like trophy sort of things you would get for like soccer practice that is inscribed with the most votes because I think it got more votes than almost any of the other articles, at least during the contest.
It probably had more votes on it than 7,000 did.
It had so many. It's so fucking funny.
And about half of them were downvotes.
Obviously more than half because it's in the positives now, but
it's what he was going for. It's what they were both going for.
Yeah, it really stole my thunder.
And it worked. This article, on the other hand, was designed. This is not an act of trollery.
No. Yeah. So basically, it's a very simple idea, but it's kind of one of those ones where you go, "Wait, what?" And it's really horrific. So there's an unknown number of cubic extra-dimensional spaces measuring approximately 10 kilometers on each edge. Upon any human's death, any human. So this happens to everybody. Their consciousness is transported to an instance of SCP-179. I'm sorry, 7179, where they will physically remanifest in the same state as they were upon death, except in perfect health. And also, they can get hurt. It's not like just like they're not some spiritual, this isn't heaven, but they will just like regenerate. And there are no new cases of human death where the consciousness does not appear in these things. So this is happening to all of us. So this is very much like that one, that famous one, which is like the minute you know about it, then you will experience your body rotting away and that
Right.
famous one, which I can never remember the number of.
Damarung 2.0.
Yes, yep.
With this being the 2.0.
And this is a really, really good example of a modern attempt and success at fridge horror, because we follow through one person's kind of multi-millennial experience in this afterlife. At first it's 10 years, 2 years, and then it's 18 years, and then it's 2,000 years, and then it's 8,500,000 years, 500,000 years. And we just continue, that's 8,500,000,000 years, excuse me. But
Get it right.
yeah. And so basically this person's like slow, not for us, but slow in the sense of passage of time, slow, kind of like loss of humanity. And in a really, really very clinical, the thing that I was, really my strongest influence on him was there were moments where he kind of told us what this person Hiddleston was feeling at a specific time, and I was like, well, you need to trim as much of that as possible and get rid of it and make it as clinical as possible, because you want us to project our emotional states on him for the most part, because then it's, oh my god, what would happen if I was there, and how creepy that is.
That's good advice. I provided like grammar advice.
Well, I can't do that because I'm lazy as shit. I barely know how to do good grammar for myself.
See, it's me as well. I'm lazy as shit. I have trouble thinking about like what would make this story better, but I'm quite good at going, oh, that was wrong. That was wrong. That was wrong. Which means I did nothing. Which means I did nothing because Cal makes like one grammar or spelling mistake per article. He's almost always super clean, as is Dysadron.
Yes.
Why, thank you. I mean, you always seem to get better feedback, in my experience at least, more gratitude for the grammar and the spag cleanups than you do for the the poking of parts which maybe are a little bit flimsy, because there's always this kind of resignation of a completely valid point, but now I have to go and fix it, and fixing it is not just replacing a comma for a full stop or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm always just trying to make shit better, and I have no problem telling people the painful truths. I just, as we talked about last time, I'm always couching it in. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to, I typically don't make these things public. I rarely leave critical statements in the discussion posts because why? I don't want to just insult somebody. But if someone's coming to me for crit, I'm going to be like, hey, this part just doesn't work. And there was none of that here. This all worked. I just thought it's going to be on just another level if you can just make it as impersonal as possible. And it will really... I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to give away what happens to this person slowly over the millennia. And I don't want to give away the twist, which is, the very last line of the article. Because ever since I read this, I have been thinking about it. Literally, for the last 4 months. I have never I love almost all of Cal's articles that I've read. This is, I think, his finest. It's really upsetting. It's really, really great. And it impressed the shit out of me. When he gave it to me, I was just like, wow. I didn't even think you had it in you. This is so... I couldn't write this. This is so good. And I'm glad it's highly rated because it is out of control how good it is.
It is.
And honestly, I wanted to do more anthology articles, but and I've been distracted by other, articles I wanted to talk about. But, almost every single one that I've read, I have not read every single article. There was all 31 of them, but almost all the articles that I've read in anthology have been just fantastic. And
I mean, I think you could see that in just like this article is in series 8 and it's at plus 438. So like the reception on this was extremely strong. This is Cal's second highest article.
Yeah. And deservedly so.
What's the highest?
The highest one is
computer?
It's abnormality, 5545 with Yas.
Yeah, that was great.
But it's close. It's actually quite close. There's only like 40 something votes between them.
I just love every time I think about Cal's writing, I think about that one he wrote about the cat, and I just fucking love it. All right. Okay.
See, that's an example of the risk taking kind of thing, where he'll publish something where you just know half the people are going to read it and go, and that's part of the brilliance of it, is he's always willing to do that, and it almost always works.
Your Honor, League of Legends.
Your Honor.
God, I love that article. I don't even understand why people were upset at it. It's so funny. Anyway, whatever. Okay, Harry, let's talk about yours.
Yeah, okay.
So yet again, will we be talking about this first one? This author, which everyone should go. This person should be in the top fucking 20 authors already. I know they're brand new, relatively brand new, but it's a bad idea.
It's a bad idea.
It's a bad idea. Or Asabi is fucking brilliant, and I'm so jealous because the whole reason I joined the site was I was inspired by Metaphysician, and I kind of went my own way writing. And I feel like It's a Bad Idea has just like, and I'm not trying to say that Asabi's writing is copying Metaphysician in any way, but so much so kind of captures that same spirit of it.
It's the same vibe. There's the same cosmic horror, Lovecraft but not racist sort of thing going on.
Yeah, and then different.
But that's not fair either, because Lovecraft was only good at writing descriptions of how it feels for something weird to happen. Mm-hmm. Like his actual prose skill wasn't great. Right. Meta's prose skill is great, and Asabi's prose skill is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm mostly going to talk about when we talk about this one.
So, basically, this is about a person who has kind of a fucked up dream of a dead quote-unquote angel on a beach. And I'm just gonna, before you give your, I just want to read this crazy paragraph, because it's just, this is the reason why Asabi is like so good at this shit. It's crazy. The carcass was a fetid thing. Its putrid scent seemed to permeate time and space directly into John's nostrils. Its mass was amorphous, made of bubbling pustules of oil and blubber, too big to be anything of Earth's oceans, the size of a small house at least. It looked made of wax, melted from some unseen candle wick atop its disgusting shape. Underneath its folds, John sensed form, structure, order, a skeleton of titanic strength and beauty. What the fuck?
That's the same thing that goes on in A Place to Drown In, which we've talked about
this
before,
is related to in a kind of remote way. Anyway,
where this really weird, gross stuff is described, and then there's a certain religious rapture, and the person like has an unaccountable desire for it, and it's like, ooh, this is weird.
The more I think about it, the more I think It's a Place to Drown is my favorite 7K entry. Like, it's just
that's
incredible.
It's perfect. It's so good, and it's still criminally underrated. No matter how high its rating gets, it's always going to be criminally underrated because it's spooky as shit. If that was the entry for like the horror contest, it absolutely should have been SCP-3000 if it was posted back.
Oh my god, it's so good. Anyway, why'd you pick this one?
I picked this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very recent and it's a tale, which means it's in plus 30 range. Like that's almost universal, unless you're talking about Captain fucking Kirby, who managed to publish a tale a couple of weeks ago at max, which is at plus 300 because it's incredible. But that's like massive outlier. That almost never happens.
Yeah,
it's good tale, by the way. Nuclear Option by Captain Kirby, really good tale.
I think I have two tales that are like above 100, and I'm like, oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, I have a very, very small list of those myself. They're mostly my really long emotional character building ones. Generally speaking, a tale that's been published fairly recently by an author who's relatively well known will sit at plus 30 forever, which is irritating. But you get better responses from tales because you can really let loose with the prose, and often you get the best comments on tales. This is immaculately cool. This is such a really, 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 really well written story. It's dense, lush horror prose, and it's benthic horror, maritime horror, which is why it's connected to Dodo Devil's site 184. I think it's 184, which is a maritime anomalies sort of site, and it's about somebody who's having dreams of this strange not even pseudo religious maritime horror dream, and ends up having relevance in real life as they encounter this spooky ship out there in the water.
Which anytime you get like a spooky rusting like abandoned ship, I'm like, oh, I'm in. Like I know that's a trope, but I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. Ghost ships are, yes, BFF. It's great stuff. God, I sounded so old saying that acronym. Like I just felt like I aged 10 years saying BFF out loud. It's one of those moments, right, where you can tell you're just being an old person suddenly. How the hell did that happen? I'm not that old.
The kids say BFF, don't they?
Oh, but no, you must have felt really old when you just said the kids say out loud. Right?
Well, that was intentional. Yeah.
But
as long as you don't think that LOL stands for lots of love, Harry.
I was around when this term became a thing, all right? Thank you very much.
I remember when LOL was lots of love. That's weird. Anyway.
Okay, I'm not that old.
Yes,
anyway, this article hits on like so many of my interests. One of my favorite things in this genre is the Fail Better Games universe of stories, which are Fallen London and Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies, it's a Lovecraftian, Victorian, generally watery horror about an underground cave in the Victorian era where London gets sent down there, and there's all kinds of eldritch monstrosities in a giant black ocean under the ground. And this has that vibe where it's got this extremely tight but dense, really evocative prose describing the horror and the rapture of deep places with dark waters and spined things thrashing in the deep. And it's part of a whole constellation of things being done these days by horror writers to effectively replace Lovecraft, since he was such a piece of shit, by taking all the stuff that he did well and doing it better, building on it, but replacing it at the same time. And the maritime angle on this is handled so extraordinarily well. The descriptions of the things that are going on are so spooky and weird. And Asabi has a lot of this stuff, because this is The Beach Part 1. Part 2 is already out, and is obscenely low rated and needs to be read by everybody. And there's going to be more, because Asabi has all this stuff to write about this extremely spooky water-based, beach-based, cosmology-based story. And it's a journey that this person takes through this whole universe of bizarre benthic horrors, and it's so ridiculously great. It's so easy to read, and I can't wait for there to be more of it. So people need to go out and give him some credit for it.
Yeah, that paragraph that I read early on, that's just like one little slice. And it does, Asabi does like grounded, very character-based prose really well, and then can slip into this other
reverie.
Yeah, it's a description of something that is truly horrible and upsetting, while also couched in a sense of like religious awe, which is I'm so jealous of it.
I am as well. It's truly phenomenal.
I heard they're making it into a movie as well with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh my god.
The Beach?
Yeah.
Famous 90s film? No?
The Titanic, yeah.
Was it famous?
I'd say it was pretty famous.
Was Titanic famous?
No, The Beach.
Oh, The Beach, okay.
I remember seeing that movie in theater and walking out going, nah, that did nothing for me.
Well, in DiCaprio movies, this is more like Shutter Island.
It also did nothing for me.
Good reference.
I like Shutter Island.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong.
It's a far better Silent Hill movie than the Silent Hill movie was.
Disagree.
No, it's Dysadron.
Hey.
All right, so we're moving on.
Yeah.
Or did you guys have something you wanted to say about that one?
No, I'm just so impressed with Asabi's prose and how frequently Asabi can do the thing that I read, where, you know, you're using words that I use all the time in my writing, and yet it is to such a more effective result. There is, you know, I write very different things than this, but it's just, I'm just so impressed with it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Give Asabi the ocean, give them the moon, and you'll be terrified.
Right, because I think last time we talked about M is for Moon, which was Asabi's entry for the for, why can't I think of arc
Anthology.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
It has been a week. All right. Yeah, let's move on.
You're telling me.
Yeah, I know. So the next one you picked was SCP-2574, What Rough Beast by Absent-Minded Nihilist.
Yes.
I'm unsurprised.
I'm going to interject and say I'm really excited to hear what Harry has to say about this one, because it was on our list last time, and yeah, I'm just intrigued as to what Harry's take here is, because it's a really interesting article, but I'm not quite sure I get it 100%.
Good.
So please elucidate it for me.
Yes. Sounded like Grigori also had a prefatory statement to make there.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a very okay. This article starts very much of its time, and then it elevates, in my opinion. It starts off, okay, there's a 12-meter tall lion made out of sandstone and mussels, surrounded by a flock of 6,000 birds of prey that are constantly chipping away at it. And this line is just constantly moving forward through cities, through people, doesn't matter. Hundreds of people have died, millions of dollars of damage have done, and it just keeps going through this one specific place, which is Sarajevo, which is, you know, the famous city in Eastern Europe. And as they go, the Foundation records in like a table format, so it's very Series 3, even earlier, really. Records various anomalous effects this thing is having on the surrounding society, on geopolitics, on just, you know, physical reality as well, and they just kind of keep getting weirder and weirder. And there are a number of collapsibles, but none of them are very long. They're like these little blurbs of
it
people.
It looks so much longer than it is.
Right.
It's very short, actually.
I was going to say it also ends of its time with the 13 collapsibles, 3 of which are nested.
Yeah, and I remember, you know, when I first looked at this last time, and it was just like, oh my god, what did you pick? And it's not, I mean, the collapsible material doesn't even double the length.
No, it's really, really short.
Yeah.
I think I said when I said it, like, it looks like it's huge.
Yeah.
It's not huge.
Yeah, it's great because the collapsibles are just specific. And I don't even know why they're collapsibles. Honestly,
really.
now they could just not be collapsibles. But
Yeah, I wouldn't have collapsed these at all.
I mean, I don't use collapsibles at all anymore. But these little blurbs of people that have either witnessed this creature, or people's reactions, or also kind of this connection to what we already know is Harry's favorite poem.
Yeah, I guess that's a segue enough. This was suggested to me. I hadn't read this until fairly recently. It was suggested to me by Stormbreath, I'm fairly certain, because I was talking about my favorite poem, which is The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, which actually has deep lore significance to my On Guard 43 story going forward. The Second Coming is a poem written by Irish poet Yeats, who was concerned about, to put it lightly, the First World War, and concerned about the Irish Wars of independence with Great Britain, and had thoughts about how history cycles between periods of order and science and mysticism and chaos. And he wrote this poem, which I'm going to read because it's not even very long. It's content-wise extremely long, but in terms of the time it takes to read it, it is not very long. And it's extraordinarily famous. Like, it's not exactly a basic bitch favorite poem, but it's not that far off, because this is a very, very well-known piece of literature, especially the ending of it, which is extraordinarily well-known.
Yeah.
But you'll immediately, I think, see where the plot of this SCP comes from this poem, because it really, really does. And I can recite it from memory because, again, it's my favorite poem, and I memorized it because I just adore it. So I'll read it. It's only like 20 lines long or whatever. So, Professor Voice. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know the 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. That's the poem.
Wonderful.
It's spooky as fuck without seeming to mean anything, which is the immediate reaction to it.
It's a very Lynchian poem.
It's very Lynchian. It's very
Or actually, I guess we could say that maybe Lynch is very Yeatsian, but
well, yeah. I mean, probably my like second or third favorite poem is "Through the dark of futures past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire walk with me.
Fire walk with me.
Fire walk
I
with
scream
me."
the end of it.
Well, there's really no way I'm gonna beat Ray Wise's performance in his last episode. It is very Lynchian, but like reading it, it's nonsense. This poem, because it's about birds flying out of control away from their owners, and a sphinx stomping through the desert, being accosted by birds as it heads towards a fixed space. But it's Yeats talking about epochal change. It's talking about the world transferring between states and sort of madness coming with it. And that's what this article is about. Literally, the Sphinx is real. It's actually there. It's actually marching around, and it's turning the landscape around it into the First World War's landscape, which is just spooky and weird and nonsensical. And I think there's some criticism in the comments that are like, you made the Second Coming literal? Like the events of the poem are actually physically happening in the real world, and that's kind of weird to a lot of people. And yes, it is done directly. But it's done so that there can be all of this commentary on the horrors of war and the horrors of war's eternal relevance, because it's marching towards Sarajevo, which is not disconnected from modern cycles of violence by any stretch of the imagination. And it's talking about the horrors of war and the horrors of the cyclical nature of war. War keeps coming back. War is still a problem. War is never going to go away. and the absolute horror of it is also related to the poem, and is also related to the poet in a way that I'm not going to spoil. As you read the article, you begin to understand that Yeats in this story has a very specific role to play as the bearer of this apocalyptic message. And that's the horror of it to me, is it's just such an insanely psychological thing about the real horrors of the real world twisted into a cosmological apocalypse. You can't tell I kind of like the poem, and I kind of like the article.
Yeah, I can see people not complaining, but like having criticism for the fact that, well, you just made it a literal thing. But
you took the poem and you made it actually be happening. But it's a lot deeper than that, because the snippets of people's experiences are so much of the value of it.
But I think that that's a good way for especially our version of fiction on the SCP Wiki to like reintroduce very important things in culture or you know, in history and discuss them. I don't think that's a problem at all, because it gives you it gives the reader a further chance. You know, maybe they haven't read this poem. They're probably aware of it, like you said. Certainly, a lot of people don't know what it's about. Those last two lines have just been quoted in a bunch of spooky stories.
Yeah, it shows up in The Stand by Stephen King most famously. It's a very popular last couple of lines because it's so evocative. What rough beast its hour come round at last slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. It's like, I don't know what that means, but it's scary. I do know what that means, but it's still scary.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've
just pinged you a link, actually, Harry, to a cover, in inverted quotes, of the poem by Joni Mitchell, who sings the music, and it's evocative. It's actually how I first heard the poem. I think commenting on comments and people saying, like, I don't know. I feel like if any article can get any one reader to talk about it with the passion and the fire which you have talked about 2574, I almost feel like it's a victory. And the detractors and stuff, so obviously most criticism is valid and should be considered, but yeah, it obviously means a great deal to you, and it was really enjoyable listening to you talk about it and hearing that passion come through. I've got here in my notes just I think it's on one of the collapsibles, I can't remember which, but just a line of it didn't even turn to look, it just stared straight ahead, dead-eyed, blank. And the writing is really good, and it doesn't rely and it doesn't get by the connection to the poem. It's in and of itself a great piece of writing. And
it's like a film adaptation.
Yeah, please also acknowledge the fact that I managed to get through that without making a pun on the fact that the last word is blank.
I was expecting that was where you were going. I was surprised it wasn't.
No, I kept it serious. I'm proud of myself.
You did a good job.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people want to be critical of things that are obviously inspired and further discussed, famous pieces of work or famous events in history. And I don't know, I think we should give people a little bit of leeway, I mean, this could have been a very boring article if that's all it was. If it was literally, let's make that poem literal, but it's not. At first that's what it seems like it is. But once we get to the collapsibles and make these little blurbs that tell a bunch of miniature pieces of what's happening, we get this feeling, and it's as much a tonal piece as the maybe not as much, but it's certainly evoking the same sort of like quiet, anxious horror at changes, especially centered around warfare, as the original poem. And I think it, like Dysadron was saying, if any article can inspire that kind of passion in anybody, it's worthwhile. But I think that there's something to be said for using short fiction to discuss things that have mattered to you and further. I remember in the Chronicles of Martian Chronicles, Bradbury does the House of Usher Part 2, and I would have no idea. I had no idea who Poe was when I read that. It was 12, and I was so creeped out by that. I went and read the Poe thing. I kind of wish I hadn't, but I think that stuff matters. We can trace lines through through fiction in all these different ways, and I think it's fucking cool shit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Dysadron?
Yeah, just one last thing from me on this is that, Harry, you have yet to comment on the article on the wiki. Yes. And I feel like you could write a fantastic comment, so I would implore you to do so.
Yes, I am going to have to write a comment on this article, not least so that I can make it obvious that I had already thought through my someday coming out solo 001 proposal, largely about the Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, and that this article did not affect that. But yes, I will leave a comment on this one because I do adore it. It was talking about the 001 that I have and the Yates connection, which is a connection to my big storyline in On Guard 4-3. That it was talking about that. I think that caused Stormbreath to go. I think it was Stormbreath to go. Did you read this one? Have you read this one? No. Oh, this is cool. And it was also very pleasant because what we were talking about earlier, where you'll be dissuaded from writing something if something similar is already on the wiki. This isn't similar to what I was going to do, so it was also good. Yeah, so good article.
Yeah. I completely relate to someone feeling like, oh well, it's you made the poem literal, but I think there's a lot. It's since the first time I read it, which to be fair was not until you had suggested it for the last podcast. Yeah. But it's it's got a real haunting, it's got really great imagery. It's really worth a read. Like everything Definitely. That we cover on this podcast.
Yes, we haven't really covered anything we think is shit.
No, except for Chaos Insurgency, but we did suggest some good articles.
That's what we do.
All right, let's move on. So this next one is Scarecrow Factory by Ip, which is part
in the middle of the series.
Right in the middle of the series, which is part of the first Black Autumn, which was this thing that Ip was doing not quite every year, but was about his, primarily his. I know he didn't start it, but canon SNC but it's basically his SNC Plastics, which is kind of this horror-focused narrative, based town, and in every Halloween, because this town is so connected to the narrative, the metafiction aspects of things, there's some sort of crisis. And he did these tale series called Black Autumn, which are wonderful, and everyone should go read them. What do you want to say about? Black Autumn is just so much fucking fun in general. This is a great example of these tales being interconnected, but also fairly well stood on their own. They're really impressive. He wrote so many.
Black Autumn is the very special episode of SNC Plastics. If you think of SNC Plastics as a TV show, which is, I believe, the best way to think about SNC Plastics, because it's about a site in a nexus, a large area of anomalous activity where narrative forces, as you say, have extremely advanced effects on people's lives, to the effect that if I were to say what's the worst that could happen, it will cause calamity because of that trope, right? Murphy's Law is very much in effect. And people's lives are affected by what a more interesting story for their life would be when they live in Sloth's Pit, Wisconsin, the subject of SNC Plastics. SNC Plastics is the front company for Site 87 because SCP. And it's one of the largest canons, SNC Plastics, on the site. The first couple of articles were written by Jorik, but they were very, very tenuous descriptions of everyday life at a site, which isn't even, I don't think, numbered, with two characters who don't generally actually have any further going impact on the canon. One of them does, and one of them doesn't at all. The two first articles were just Jorik playing around with the idea of slice of life SCP stuff, and then Ip's first contribution to the canon is the third article in the canon, Last Days at Camp, that sets up the reason for these people being here in the first place, and then the whole canon is Ip. With contributions from other authors coming in. I don't think Jorik ever actually wrote another article for it, and various other people have written quite a few really good articles, but it's primarily Ip, and Ip's the one who made the setting what it is, and we always do say he didn't make the canon, but he did make the canon, totally did. Made it what it is. And like I say, Black Autumn is the very special episode sort of thing, because SNC Plastic stories are often very, very funny. Ip's got a big comedy bent in the stuff that he does, but they're also very humanist. They're focused on individual people and their lives, and he's got one of the most fleshed out cast of characters at a Foundation site on the website. He's got just dozens of characters, and they've all got personalities and relationships to each other, and that's the big thing. So they're very often very cheerful stories, even within the context of SCP stuff, to the point where you can get the impression this is probably the site where most of the people are better than they usually are at Foundation facilities.
Would you say that this has an inspiration for yourself, Harry?
Yeah, this was probably the number one inspiration for my own stuff, and the way that my characters interact and my site and all that stuff. Absolutely, it was because I read all of S&C Plastics, literally all of it, which is a lot. And part of the reason was I read it for the collections team, who are trying to make it more plausible for people to find the kinds of tales they are interested in, because most of S&C Plastics is tales. But I also read it because Ip suggested it. I created a primer for Reddit that Ip was writing on S&C Plastics as a draft exchange thing, and I was like, this actually sounds like something I would want to read. And then I read all of it, which includes Black Autumn. And Black Autumn there's 4 of them. Black Autumn 1, which doesn't have a number because it's the first one. Black Autumn 2, Roman numeral. Black Autumn 3, Arabic numeral. And Black Autumn 4, Roman numeral again, just to make people angry. 2 is generally considered the best. 3 is pseudo incomplete, and 4 is the last one. And I adore all of them. They're all really, really good. But the premise in this one, because this is the original Black Autumn, right? I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Yes. This is the original Black Autumn.
Yeah.
This is the first one, and all the Black Autumns are about a shift in tone, where this generally jovial story suddenly takes a really dark turn and something horrible starts happening. And they actually get progressively darker. The first one is dark, and the second one is darker, and then the third one is more global, and then the fourth one is the darkest of them all. The first one has corpses of townsfolk showing up everywhere inside of scarecrows, just popping up in the town in unexpected places, stuffed full of corpses. And the town reels because these are actual people that they know and care about, and they've just died in the most absurd way possible. And the site 87 people are trying to figure out what the fuck is going on here, and they go through exploring it, and they find a bunch of connections to some old local mysteries and strangeness. And the Black Autumns are long. These are long tail series. They're usually like a dozen tales long or something like that. And the first one, this is somewhere in the middle. They're going out to investigate a lead on what's going on and figure out like what the fuck's going on with these fucking scarecrows. And they're also looking into some pumpkin farm shenanigans. I think in a tale prior to this, Ip introduces and then kills his own author avatar.
Yeah, he did.
What I've mentioned before is my favorite title on the wiki, Pictures of Plastic People. The reason that was an immensely long preface to say the reason I picked this one for my horror thing is because this has such a sudden shift into absolutely terrifying situation that it could only happen in S&C Plastics, where the mode is usually so positive and upbeat and chipper. Because the characters are all characters, and they chat with each other, and they have relationships, and they're all friendly, and they jibe, and they quip at each other. And while they're out doing that on a case, this guy gets a root around his foot, and it starts pulling him. And they suddenly realize that this entire pumpkin farm is about to pull the researcher who was just examining the scene underground, and there's nothing they can do about it.
It's so tense.
And it's not happening quick. Right. It's extremely tense. It's like, this is a character who's well established and you care about them, and suddenly they might be about to die, and their boss is there, and the tone completely shifts, and their boss is like, you know how to set up your body to give you the highest possible chance of surviving being dragged underground, right? Because they have protocols for this, because it's the SCP Foundation. And the guy is preparing for what is definitely going to kill him, and also giving messages to people. And then it does pull him underground and drags him through the underground, and he finds himself, he doesn't die, but he gets very badly injured, because that's what happens if you get dragged through the ground by a root. And he finds himself underground in a cavern populated by scarecrows on the roof, upside down, hanging over him, moving up and down, backwards and forwards, which is why the chapter is called Scarecrow Factory. He's been dragged down to where the horrible scarecrows are coming from. And it's also dreamlike and horrible, but also real and visceral. There's just the simple human details of here's what happens when you get pulled underground, but then also he's been pulled underground by weird pumpkin roots, and there's terrifying fucking scarecrow factory running on the ceiling back and forth, and the whole time the guy is just trying to handle it with professionalism and record his thoughts. and it's so completely counter to the tone of what you would expect in an SNC Plastics piece, which makes, I think, one of the best horror bits. And all the Black Autumn ones have just terrific horror in them.
Yeah, I had not read the majority, or not the majority, because I think Black Autumn actually makes a significant chunk of SNC Plastics.
It does. It's like half of SNC Plastics
but
by volume.
I hadn't read a lot of the stuff that came out earlier, and I don't remember when I got turned on to it. It wasn't right. I think 2 was already out when and I read Black Autumn and then Black Autumn 2 back to back. And it wasn't until like a couple years later that I went back and read all the SNC Plastics leading up to it. Black Autumn is so, and I had no idea that these were established characters, and I didn't care because he does such a good job on establishing these characters and having a voice for, like, you know, there's like a solid dozen. You know, there's more than a dozen characters in general, but like there's a dozen characters that are important. Yeah. And does a wonderful job establishing them as people, and making the horrific events that they go through that much more tense, because you really give a shit about whether or not they are going to make it through. Black Autumn is it's just fantastic.
It definitely is.
Yeah, I was really, I came into this tale without having read any other Black Autumn shenanigans, and having read a smattering of S&C Plastics, which I believe might be the canon title from your intro to this article, Harry. This was, I was really impressed with, like, the realism, I want to say, in terms of it was so refreshing. I think it's such a trope now, right, when an MTF or a researcher or whoever, something goes wrong and everything goes to crap and everyone starts freaking out and panicking, and it's like, bang, 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 bang. Whereas with this one, right, it is a very, I mean, I've never been in a situation where I'm being pulled underground by an anonymous anomalous. My mouth is now failing me. Source, but that calm professionalism of getting the t-shirt over his head and bracing and knowing it's gonna hurt, and then when he's down in the cavern, the recording of information he thinks could be useful and not trying. I think there's a section where he doesn't try to stand and to walk because he knows that he's been hurt and he's been injured. It just elevates the whole piece, and also not without trying to give spoilers, the humanity of everything and every entity within the piece, again, just elevates it to another level.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah, I just can't recommend. I mean, even if you feel too intimidated to go through S&C Plastics entire, which that's fair, just none of these individual chapters of Black Autumn are very long. They're about 3,000 words usually at most.
I've always been amazed at his restraint with that. He's always able to churn out tales of fairly nearly the right length for the average person's attention span, and they always do something unique in each tale, which is amazing.
Yeah, I just cannot recommend Black Autumn enough. Like, even if it's just the first one, dip your toe in. If you're not much in the way of reading much prose on the wiki, if you don't read a lot of tales, this is a wonderful first step into that direction. Ip's, especially Black Autumn, but Ip in general has had such an ridiculous influence on both Harry and me. So if you like either of our stuff, go back and read Ip. For me, it's Ip and Metaphysician, which is hilarious because two very opposing authors.
So completely different.
I know. And I don't write like either of them, but they were both very influential. Anyway, all right.
I mean, there's a very interesting conversation to be had, most likely at another point, about what you're inspired by, what you want to write, and what you then actually end up writing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that is
There's
a whole
definitely
conversation, because you never can really predict. Like, it's why I'm so jealous of Wasabi's stuff, because that's what I want to write. but that's never what I actually want to write.
That's right.
I mean, sometimes I do. My thing for anthology was an attempt to do that, and I think it turned out pretty well. But
It did indeed. Yes, absolutely.
But in general, I want to write things that are fairly baked in surreal absurdism, and the horror maybe kind of baked in for flavor text. It is very interesting how the things that we are attracted to, the things that we want to write. We talked about in the last episode how utterly obsessed with Dune I am, but I would never want to write a story like that. But I love Dune. I mean, I'm obsessed with that book.
Grigori and J. Dune are getting married.
That's right. That's who I'm talking about. Yes.
It's the flower gold.
Okay.
Going down the aisle, throwing pedals everywhere.
Well, we have 20 minutes left, so let's.
Yeah, we got one article left, and it's one I'm not going to spoil too badly.
Okay.
Well, I am going to spoil it too badly a little bit, but
What is it?
this one is the last on our list. We've made it to the last one on our list. SCP-5366, Until Death Do Us Part, and Every Day After by Pentagon. Good friend of all of ours. And a great author. So this article is about... I like how nobody had anything to say when I said he was a good friend of all of ours.
It's true. It's just true.
Your gaze is blank and pitiless as the sun.
I love Dagon.
Yes, Dagon is a hero.
And I mean, by Dagon, I mean the undersea god, not the author.
Yeah, yeah, not Pentagon. Yeah. So this is a terrific bit of. It's not really fridge horror. You don't have to go away and think about it, but it's horror that hits you halfway through and goes, "Oh, this is what's happening,"
and then digs down.
It digs down.
Pun intended.
It's a good little metaphor there. So it's a thing about how when people go to graves, and I'm not gonna read the description. I'm gonna describe it in my own less clinical way of describing it. It's when people go to graves of loved ones and they speak to the graves of loved ones, supernatural phenomena appear to happen around them. The wind starts blowing more, and things start moving when you're not looking at them, and there's effects on plant growth, and birds start acting differently when these people go to the graves of their loved ones and they talk. And there's also something else going on when these people, and I think this is meant to be a pretty much universal phenomenon, or they don't know what triggers this to happen or not. So it's a thing that can happen in any case where someone goes and does this. And the implication is it's not just things happening on the surface when you go to visit your loved ones and talk to the grave that happen. There's something else that starts to happen underneath the surface, say where the person is buried, with involving the person themselves. The implications of what happens when these people are keeping the memories of their loved ones alive and going and talking to them in their grave sites is that you really are keeping them alive, in a sense.
Yeah, it's the reversal of your expectation.
You expect this. It feels like it's going to be something either heartwarming or bittersweet. It's not.
It's really not.
That's not where the story goes at all.
I love this article.
And we're laughing because of how horrifying.
Yeah,
it is.
it's not funny.
It's not played for comedy.
No, there's nothing
Dagon does
funny
write stuff
about
that's
it.
played for comedy. This is not played for comedy.
Yeah.
This is a story about when people are keeping this memory alive, they're inflicting something, and it's a very interesting take. I don't think it's necessarily meant to have any kind of metaphorical meaning.
No,
it's just meant to be a thing that makes you go, oh my god, in horror at the possibility. It's a thing no one ever thinks about. And I don't want to spoil it because I think it needs to be read, even though I think I've hinted at it enough that you might be able to guess. But This is SCP-5366. It's rated highly, but not highly enough, because it's a really, really good article. It's not very long, and it's got a lot of punch.
Yeah, it's very quick, and it is very dependent on I would say interpersonal interaction, but that's not really true, which you'll understand when you read it. It's just there's dialogue here, and it's very effective. And it's not very long.
It's
go on.
No.
If Pentagon has crit one of your articles and you've not read this, you owe him one.
Yes,
So go check
Dagon's
it
done
out.
a lot of crits, so
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Okay, so let's read through some emails and then you can go evaporate, Harry.
Yes, it's just that I have dinner at the same time every day,
No,
all the time, always.
yeah.
That's why. That's where the time limit comes in. It's a thing that happens outside of my control.
That's fine.
The food descends from the heavens.
Like mana.
Cost effective.
All right.
Yes, exactly.
Who wants to read Fern's email?
Oh, we've got 3 emails. How convenient.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. You're the boss. Which one do you want to read?
I want to read Teeth's.
I'll take Fern's then,
okay.
mainly because
Okay.
I was hoping to take Teeth's, but I'll leave it. To
Well,
you
you're the
before
guest.
we-
You can take it.
No. I'll leave it to you on the. But I want a promise that we'll get voices.
You're the guest.
Correct.
You can take teeth.
No. I'm taking Fern. So this is from Fern.
All right.
I look forward to hearing you guys start discussing canons. I hope Unfounded gets an episode. That said, are there any canons you guys think are often overlooked?
SNC Plastics.
Yeah. I mean, especially
It is
because
underlooked. It's mostly tails. They're mostly like 20 or something.
well, you know, most canons. I feel like a lot of canons are made up of tails. It doesn't get the attention
Yes.
it deserves, obviously, because I think it's intimidating. I think people go like, "Oh, these are all these established characters who've been going for years," but they're all super accessible. And
Absolutely.
like Dysadron just said, he'd never really read that much, and he got a lot out of that Scarecrow Factory article, and that's always been my experience with Ip's articles, where you can have no understanding of Ip's prior works. That's why we talk about them so frequently. He has real voice.
Absolutely.
What do I think canons are overlooked? I think a lot of canons are overlooked. I think canons in general, people think it's like the best way to get like attention, and in reality, you look through that canon list and there's a lot of stuff you're like, oh, what is that? I don't even know what that is. The Doctors of the Foundation,
Every time I look at the list, I go, wait, one's that?
Ship in a bottle, like Old Man in the Sea. Like there's so many canons. There's 2 space canons.
I was about to say exactly those words. There's 2 space cannons,
And they're different, and they're great.
I could not, under gunpoint, remember which one is which.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
I know the names, but what distinguishes them escapes me at the moment.
Yeah.
And I no clue what the Old Man in the Sea is about at all.
No, me either. I haven't read any of that. There's the Green King.
So I can't say it's underrated because I don't know what it is. Yeah, the Green King.
That's I don't even know what that. I mean, I've read it. I don't know what it's about. I mean, it's just a lot of canons get overlooked. I think it's very easy to talk about the canons that we like because we all talk about the same canons over and over again. Not all of us, but we talk about War on All Fronts, and we talk about
Definitely.
End of Death for good reason. They're great. I think Apotheosis is not talked about a lot because it's kind of an open and shut story. And somebody asked me recently what canon I would like to revitalize if I was to do it again for that contest, and I think it's Apotheosis. I'll be selfish.
What about in terms of visibility, Grigori? In Memoria added them.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I have a bias because I've written for this 3 times and will certainly write for it again. And it's about Sarkics, but it's about a version of Sarkics I don't personally headcanon, but I think it's a wonderfully complex story. In Memoriam Addendum is about the slow failure of the world to take the Sarkic threat seriously. It paints them in a very negative light, which is fascinating to me because I look at them in a very different way. And I've written several stories about Lovitar in there. It is very underrated because there's a lot of tales, and the SCPs are kind of all interconnected, but it's really worth people's time, and it's broken down in a really cool way because there's like acts. You can just kind of see where does it start, and it kind of factors in older Sarkic articles, and then it kind of factors in newer ones, and it's really great.
Broken down with acts. That's what acts are for.
Yeah. Well, most canons aren't, so.
There's the axe joke. like an axe, like. I'm getting hungry, all right? So my brain's not working.
All right. So
What do you think, Dysadron? Did you name an underrated canon?
I think this is probably one of my spicy. You two have known me for a while. I don't feel like I often have controversial takes.
Oh
I
no, it's gonna be
Don't
shipping
feel like I often have strong opinions on anything, to be honest with you. But I do think that we maybe too often conflate canons and series of articles within a specific setting on the site. And I think how does that answer into the question? Not a lot. I'm just making a point. Two canons I think two canons I quite like, which I also think are quite underrated, are Aces and Eights and Doctors of the Church, because I think they, from my understanding of their content at least, they don't do that. They're very good at establishing a world, and then it's kind of, all right, authors, go nuts, do what you want here. And I think sometimes that works well, and you get a large influx of, in general, when canons do that, sometimes it works well and you get a large influx of authors in and it blossoms. Like, I think the most obvious example of that would be Broken Masquerade. Or sometimes actually that freedom and not having 2 or 3 core people pushing forward this story means that it kind of falls off an edge a bit. But those are 2 canons I think are quite interesting and I think could do with more reads. So those are my answers.
Yeah, I think in the attempt, because so often I think, I think you're right that we mistakenly conflate canons with tale series or series of interconnected SCPs. But, a lot of times they are that. And the goal for us with No Return, certainly for myself, who I think has been pretty active with it, has been, I have series in it, but they're very different than each other. And also I have been very involved with getting people to consider, I guess, one half of that canon as a setting for them to write ideas. And I'll be selfish again and say that I think No Return is not looked at enough. That's a lie. Everything's done really well. I'm very proud. But I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, and I think you can go through the Canon Hub and you can open them all up, and there are some standout ones which on the Canon Hubs themselves have a brilliant, so you want to get involved, here's what to do. And here's also what not to do. Yeah. Don't kill off my main character because I've got plans for them. And that's the canons are awesome, and they're really awesome thing. I need a better vocabulary. I'm hungry too, Harry. It's a great show of collaboration, right? And the fact that you can build this world and invite / sometimes you don't need to invite, right? Sometimes people actively ask to participate in it and join you in building that out. And yeah, it's just another wonderful thing we do on the wiki as a thing about working together, etc.
Sure.
Yep. Big fan of canons. Can't wait to. I honestly can't wait to get to canon. Big fan. Yep. All right, we're gonna rush through. Teeth sent in this email. You know what?
Don't need to rush. It's good. We're good.
You have 8 minutes.
Go ahead. You don't need to blitz.
Okay. All right.
Yes, but it's
you're delaying it further.
We're on the emails. Like there's no danger here.
You're delaying it.
Yeah, I know. That's part of the gag. Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right.
That's part of the gag. It's just part of the gag, Grigori. It's just part of the gag.
Only 4? Go
ahead.
Four times? Okay. All right.
It's okay. It was just part of the gag.
Oh, God. You know what? Which is the email. You know what?
Read the fucking email.
I'm trying! You know what? I'm going to take and this is from Teeth.
Stop stalling.
Jesus fucking Christ. I'm going
is he ever going to get around to
Motherfucker! Shut up!
What was that? I didn't hear that, Dysadron. Could you ask the question again?
I was just wondering when Grigori was going to get round to this email. I feel like I've been waiting for the last 20 minutes for him to read it. I even
offered a lot of build-up
to read it, and he made this big thing about wanting to it. And Harry put forward this whole thing about how I was the guest, and so I should be able to read the email of my choice, but no, got stamped down. And I bet you I'm going to stop talking and Grigori's going to read this out and won't even do voices.
Well, I'm so angry now that it'll be my angry one. No, I'm done. All right. You know what? I'm going to take the reaction to that last email I sent as an advice not to send things in stranded in Halloween cosplay. Maybe it's advice for you to use some grammar check. I don't even know what my half-awake brain even meant typing that. But I swear I'm not insane. Hopefully, maybe. Anyways, horror! Oh, the horror! There's your voice. Surprisingly, I actually have something to say this week, and that is that I actually remember the first ever article in here that scared me. Though I think the only reason it got to me was that I was 10 or 11 at the time. And you know what? People stop reminding us that we're old, okay? All right? Thanks. I was in my 20s when the site came about. My late 20s. It was 1305, the cat lure. It somehow got so deeply ingrained in my little head that looking back, I'm kind of sad that the article didn't live up to my memory of it. Oh man, I'm with you there.
Yeah, there's 1 or 2, man.
Yeah. As for recent picks, I couldn't find things that generally horrified me, but I do have some that sent me on loops of deep thought and uncomfortable silence. And honestly, this is my commentary. I think that that's as often something we aim for with horror as the opposite. You know, making us have deep thoughts and uncomfortable silence. Those are half the articles we talked about today. The ones on my mind are 597, Mother of All, which is pretty good, and 2718, What Happens After. Yep, hey, there's the article. What happens after? They both just unnerve me. Damarang, yeah. They both just unnerve me in 2 completely different ways, especially 2718. Goddamn. My brain wouldn't let me forget it, so I spent literal weeks thinking it over, which is funny given the effect. Anyways, cutting myself short here. No, you didn't. This is a novel. I'm excited to hear what you have all to say this week, and given some of the suggestions I saw, this should really be fun. But before I end this, I must say I hope you all had a wonderful day in recording it otherwise. Teeth out. Aw.
That's horror. Teeth out. Ew.
Teeth out. Oh, keep them in. P.S. I'm blamming the time travel.
Yes, people don't understand. If you want to extend the vowel sound in a word, you extend the vowel. This just says I'm blamming the time travel.
Also, I don't know what you mean, teeth. What time travel? All right. Next email.
Well, we don't understand because of the time travel.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
It's still illogical. All right. My turn. Real sir. That's always such a. I feel like I want to like make a fiat here and say I always get to read this one just because I like saying his name. Real sir.
I do.
A
Hello.
good name.
Real sir. Hello. So seeing what this episode's subject is to be about, it makes me wonder about genres more generally. I got into SCP by Horror Connections, and for the horror it promised, but obviously SCP covers way more ground than just that. Think sci-fi, historical, drama, fantasy, etc., even dance. So I was wondering, in y'all's opinions, what do you think are the most underexplored or underdeveloped genres and themes within the Wiki, or just the kinds that have been underutilized within the SCP framework? Well,
It's a good question.
it is a good question. I can't think of the answer.
I actually think we don't have a lot of space horror on SCP Wiki.
Yeah,
There
we could
are some.
definitely do with more space horror. Yeah.
There are some.
We need to have a
It's stuff
third canon, I think.
yeah, like Dead Space or trying to think of what's that movie, Event Horizon, or Alien, famously, and maybe there's not a lot of other types of media either that are memorable. But I always feel like a really good article about some decrepit abandoned spaceship plagued by horrors would be real nice. So get on that, people. I'm not gonna read it. No, I'm not gonna write it, but I'll read it.
You've just made me realise. So I think there's a delay. I keep talking over people. But
It's my fault. It's because we're weird.
There's an article which is like a spaceship.
Part of the gag.
It's like basically like aliens torturing astronauts in a spaceship. for fun, and I think it's maybe like a TV program for them, something like that. But it's really, really good. And if I had remembered it and found the number, it would have been one of my picks for today's article. I will find it someday.
This was a very sensible comment though, Grigori, because I'm thinking like the Dead Space, and I'm thinking Prey and Alien Isolation, and video games. Like space horror is such an important thing,
and easily some of my favorite.
All those are phenomenal games.
Yeah,
System Shock.
Yeah. Oh God.
System Shock.
I can't wait. Come out. That was horrifying for many reasons.
Yes.
God, I can't wait for that remake to come out. Let's go.
Yes.
Space horror.
Yeah.
For me, that's the one I think about the most. Honest. Also, maybe some traditional fantasy. We don't see it. We see a lot of stuff that's influenced by. There's the Fae stuff, and there's certainly weird magic stuff.
There was an attempt to make a canon, but it didn't go anywhere. I remember the people are often every KCON now. People go, it's going to be fantasy, and then it's not. Which is why we just did fantasy in the previous contest. In 6Con, I meant.
We did nature.
Well, no, this is the most recent one.
No, we did.
We did nature. That's right. Yes, we didn't do fantasy though.
How dare you?
Well, they're gonna take away our 7th place win or 6th place winner.
Yeah, they're gonna take it away. It's gonna be kicked out.
I think we still did the best nature.
I think we did a very. We
worked it in there real good.
We made it an allegory. Yes,
we did.
Happy with it.
Pat ourselves on the back.
Again.
Yes. Thanks for coming, Dysadron. As always, this was fantastic.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much. I've had a lovely evening.
You'll have to be back again.
Yeah, definitely.
And again. Unfortunately, we got through all our articles this time, but that doesn't mean we can't just do another third horror.
Or we could do another subject entirely. It doesn't have to be horror.
Yes, we could do color-related articles. Dysadron could bring Red Moon and Amaranthine.
No, he doesn't want to give away whatever color he's going to do for the next one.
That's true.
Oh God, I don't want to give you a complex. Like if you even have an idea that like maybe that is it, please don't make that. Don't take that as a negative thing. I love those articles. Yeah. Okay. So we're getting out of here. So email here if you want to send us a message about honestly anything. Is simplycreativepeople@gmail.com. The Twitter is @SIMCREAT. And my Twitter is @Grigori Carpin.
@Harry Blank SCP.
I don't think Dysadron has it.
I'm not on Twitter.
You are smart, sir.
Not a twit.
You can find me via Smoke Signal or Carrier Pigeon.
Oh, for me,
Nice.
it's blood sacrifice, honestly. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for coming back on.
It's always a pleasure, Dysadron. It will be a pleasure again. We will be pleased all together again as part of the gag.
It's part of the gag.
Part of the gag.
It's part of the gag.
Part of the gag.